All right, guys, welcome back. Welcome back. I'm super excited to bring this topic to you today because, in previous episodes when we talked about rites of passage, you guys downloaded like crazy. So, one, thank you guys for doing it. And then, secondly, uh, Don Ross is with us, and he is from the East Coast. And I know we've got tons of listeners in the North Carolina and South Carolina area. And I'm certain that's because F3 is also big time out on the East Coast. So, all the F3 guys listening, here's your little shout out. Thanks for listening. Thanks for spreading the word and keeping things going like you guys do. So, love groups that help develop leaders. So, Don, that's what you are all about. Don Ross, he's a pastor. He's been married 20 years. He's got two boys, 15 and 13, and he's all about this, initiating boys and going through the rites of passage. So, how'd you get into this?
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Dan. It's good to be here. So, I have been, like you said, I've been in ministry for, the past couple of decades, and in just about like any ministry setting that I've been in, I have really gravitated towards working with men. So whether or not it was like kind of formal responsibility or not, I really love doing men's ministry. I've got just really a heart for helping men, trying to build up and encourage men, really just address the things that are challenges in men's lives. Because I don't know that churches and ministries have always done the best job of that. I think they've struggled to kind of figure out how to do that well. And I think men are kind of, sort of passively aware of that on the receiving end of just, church can be a difficult place for men to connect and get their questions answered a lot of times. So for me, it's kind of born out of just a desire of saying, as a man, I think, church and ministry in general can do better at reaching and connecting with us guys. But then, just kind of from my own story, I really developed a heart for helping dads. So, I would say I'm kind of stereotypical, Gen Xer, millennial. I'm kind of right on the cuff of those generations there, but sort of grew up with the baby boomer dad who, I have a great dad. I would say he kind of, typical of his generation was very focused on being a dad meant providing for the family, right? And so that's kind of what he knew and understood about being a father. And as I grew into kind of young adulthood, that left me with a lot of questions of like, what does being a man, is that really all there is to it? It's just being a provider. And I think I kind of felt intuitively that like there's probably more to it than that, but I just didn't know what it was or where to get the answers. And so that kind of set me on a journey of just saying like, how can I help? How can I help? Not only find those answers for myself, but help other men be able to kind of find those answers as well. And so that's kind of helped me get into just doing things with and for men, trying to help guys be able to address the longings of their heart, the questions that they're asking on a day-to-day basis, the challenges that we're facing, and just figuring out like what does it look like to be a follower of Jesus and a man at the same time. How can those things really be compatible? So that's kind of a roundabout answer, but a little bit about me and sort of how I got started into it.
I think that's a pretty common one for guys in our age group.
Yeah.
Um, we got a lot of farm, generation and then factory generation. And,
Uh-huh.
we're just doing what we can to get by.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, and in a lot of ways, it's I think in our culture, it's both gotten better and gotten worse. So what I see a lot of in the church today is that among uh, dads who are kind of committed to their faith and are invested in walking with God and having church and faith be a central part of their lives and of their families' lives. I see a lot of dads doing really well, doing well at investing in their kids. But I think that's still kind of the minority in terms of the culture overall. I think that fatherlessness has become an increasing epidemic in our culture, whether that's, there's not a father in the home, or there's some kind of male presence but he's not really offering anything that actually meets the needs of fatherhood for the kids in his family. I think we're kind of at like crisis levels in terms of that in our culture. So huge needs across the board in terms of helping dads, just helping men kind of figure out what does it mean to be a dad who makes a difference, and why is that something that we should even care about in the first place? All those questions are important, and I think getting even more relevant than they were for us growing up.
So you brought up questions you had about be a man. Well, that equals provider? Question mark. I think there's something more. I think there's something more.
Yeah,
Can you like just off the top of your head think back to when you were having those questions and what you thought might the something more might be, or
yeah.
what the questions were that you were asking in your own head?
Yeah. So yeah, the question, for me, it was really just, which I think it is for a lot of men, it's just, what does it mean to be a man? Like, how do I figure that out? Where do I find that out? I think I knew enough in my young adult years to know that the kind of the caricatures that our culture was providing of, machismo and,
Right.
six pack abs and, all those kinds of things. Those are fine. There's nothing particularly bad or wrong about any of that, but not sufficient. Like I knew that that's not what it amounted to either. And so for me, it was kind of like, all right, well, what is it? Like, what was I looking for in a father? And how did that help, kind of translate into what I could understand what a man was meant to be and to offer to the people around him. So I think those were good kind of like guide marks, and then ultimately just having to really kind of lean on my faith and say, all right, I think there's more here to the Christian faith in terms of what it means to be a man than even what the church would sometimes present. I think the view that I got from church most of the time was that a Christian man is somebody who's nice, who's kind, like kind of first and foremost, like causes no offense. And then is married and has kids. It was kind of like that was the sum total of what it meant to be a Christian man. And I just thought like, okay, there's way more variety to manhood in the scriptures than just that. And so, certainly there's got to be a bigger and a better picture of manhood, even that we can draw on from the scriptures to be able to help us understand what does it mean to be a man. So for me, that was kind of the question, was like, all right, what are those things about? I think a defining kind of moment for me in my 20s was beginning to realize a couple things. One, that at the core of manhood was the idea of strength. And for me, I didn't grow up playing a lot of sports. I wouldn't say that I wasn't physically active. I did some kind of individual sports kinds of things. I was a swimmer. I played golf and tennis. Some of those kinds of things growing up, but didn't do a lot of team sports. And so the whole idea of like strength and athleticism was for me kind of always sort of on the back burner. Like it was never really like something that I felt was essential or necessary to me as a man. It was kind of just like, oh, this is a nice, like, if I do it great, kind of a bonus sort of thing. But I think I began to realize in my 20s that like, as a man, like God designed my body for strength. Like that's part of the way that he has made us as men, is our bodies are built for strength. They're meant to offer strength to others. And that it really is kind of a like core, essence of what it means to be a man. Now, again, that doesn't mean that every guy has to go out and, just have, ripped, bulging muscles and, breaking out of their t-shirts kind of things, or be like men's health worthy all the time. That's not the point. That's kind of, again, sort of a caricature. But I think it did mean that I needed to be paying attention to my own body, the way that I was developing it, and how I was using it to be able to offer and to help others. And that if there were ways that I couldn't do some of those things, then I was maybe falling short of the mark. So that was kind of where things started for me. And then I began to realize that out of that the strength wasn't just kind of like a man is supposed to be strong, but it was really from strength that all the other kind of aspects of manhood began to sort of flow out for me. So understanding strength is really kind of like a foundational value, and that all the other aspects of manhood, kind of came through that lens. So another good one for me was just sort of the idea of courage. We in our modern culture kind of think about courage or bravery as, especially for men, as just like not having any fears. But I don't think that's actually realistic. I
Nope.
don't think that's anybody can do that. Our fear is just as a natural part of our bodies. But I think courage, I think the right kind of understanding of that is that that we're able to face our fears, that we have the ability to kind of move towards our fears and to confront them and overcome them, and that as men, that's particularly born out of strength, that we are able to begin to kind of see like, hey, I have this body and it has capability, and that enables me to move towards the things that I'm afraid of with strength and with courage to be able to overcome them. So, anyway, I'm kind of going on a roundabout tangent there, but some of these things were really key for me in my 20s of beginning to understand, hey, I need to be developing myself. I need to be investing in how I grow as a man, because I don't just happen upon manhood. It's not something that just kind of like gets dropped in my lap, or because I arrived at a certain age, I am a man at this point. As a male, I obviously grow up and age and mature, but to be a man means to live out some certain things, and I needed to be developing and cultivating those things in myself. And that was really kind of the big realization and understanding for me in my 20s.
So we might fast forward a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll probably go back, and I got some questions about strength. However, you've got the 5 marks of
Uh-huh.
manhood.
Yeah.
Let's just hit them all, and then maybe pick and choose and go back through some stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you're on a roll. So I'm like, I know there's 3 more coming. So like, let's just hit them.
So just for a little bit of context, these 5 marks of manhood are, kind of what I really think are the critical essence of what it means to be a man. So when we think about kind of how to answer that question, I think a lot of emphasis sometimes is put on the roles that we think men are supposed to play. Kind of
Mm-hmm.
like provider, protector,
Mm-hmm.
husband, father. Those things are good. I do think men need to live into and lean into those things. But there's plenty of ways to be a man and not have to be those things. So I don't know that those things are always really at the essence of being a man. I think they tend to flow out of that essence, and kind of men sort of naturally lean into those things, which is good. That's a really good thing. But for me, I had to kind of get back to like, okay, well, so what are the foundational basics? What are we really talking about when we're talking about manhood? And I don't know that it's as much about roles as it is about traits. So, what are the traits that really kind of surround what it means to be a man? And not just in our culture, but in most cultures throughout history. What has
Mm-hmm.
manhood really looked like? What have men had in common? And so that's where these 5 marks of manhood really come into play. And I know we'll kind of get back a little more into the rite of passage idea in a minute, but I think these 5 marks of manhood are especially crucial for our sons and for younger men today in particular, because this question of what does it mean to be a man is it's gotten so complicated and so convoluted in our society right now, that there are no clear answers. If you're just asking that question to the people around you, you're going to get 15 different answers for every 10 people that you ask. It's just nobody really knows. Nobody's comfortable saying what they think is the truth because they're afraid of getting critiqued or
Right. Right.
canceled or
Yeah.
whatever else. So it's become very, very difficult for young men to figure out in our culture, what does it mean to be a man? So, especially for our sons, as we think about trying to help our sons step into manhood, I think there's 3 really kind of key elements to that, and these 5 marks of manhood is kind of that first element, which is really, you got to give them a clear vision of what it means to be a man. You have to help your son understand, what does it mean to be a man, and it doesn't have to be that complicated. One of the things I like to tell people is, for most of the history of the world, 50% of the population has advanced from boyhood into manhood without a whole lot of problems. Like it's not that hard to figure out, really, when you think about it. But it's only kind of been in our recent Western moment that we have made it complicated and convoluted. And so the 5 marks of manhood are meant to just help give a simple baseline of how to be able to do that. So coming back to those, I know you
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
asked me
No,
a
you're
question, and
you're
now
good. You're doing
I'm
great. You're
circling
doing
back.
great. Keep
So
keep
yeah,
rolling.
strength and courage would be the first 2 of those 5 marks of manhood, which we've talked about. The others are skill, honor, and allegiance. So strength, courage, skill, honor, and allegiance. And I can just dive right into the rest of those if you want me to.
Yeah. Hammer 'em, man.
Yeah. Okay. So So we talked about strength and courage a little bit already. Skill would just be the basic idea of like, learning to be good at some things. Men are needed to offer skills to the world. When you're looking for somebody who can do something for you, men are meant to come through in those ways. And so as men, we not only, I think, we tend to be expected to be a little bit of a jack of all trades, right? We need to have a variety of skills. There's kind of a Swiss Army knife aspect to being a man. We need to be good at a number of things in order to be able to help out in our world. But I think there's also a level of like, we need to be especially skilled in one or two things. We need to have something that we really can offer expertise in, that when our friends and neighbors are looking for help in a particular thing, whether it's home improvement projects or doing your taxes or, picking out the best type of whiskey, whatever it is, like, every guy wants a go-to guy for those things, like who do I talk to when I need help with fill in the blank. And that's what men are meant to offer to each other. We do need skill to be able to kind of contribute successfully to the world. Those first three, strength, courage, and honor, are really what I would say are kind of the individual aspects of manhood. So a man can develop sort of all of those things mostly on his own. But the last two things, honor and allegiance, are really about how men relate to other people, how we relate to our world. And so they can't be developed in isolation. They have to be developed in relationship. Honor, in particular, is kind of about your peer relationships. So this is about doing right by a group of peers. So that's more of like the horizontal one. Allegiance would be more of like the vertical one. So this is like, who am I under the authority of, and how do I relate well to those, authority figures in my life? And that's both like immediate authority, which would be like, a boss or a coach or a mentor or something like that. But also ultimate allegiance, which would have more to do with, my God, who am I serving? Who really has mastery over all of my life? And what does that kind of allegiance look like? So these things in particular, I think, are really important. And one of the reasons that I think it's worth talking about these kinds of things with our sons is because in a church setting in particular, I think one of the things that we've gotten backwards is that churches tend to talk about what it means to be a good man before we ever even really talk about what it means to be a man. Now, talking about what it means to be a good man is not a bad thing. Like, we do need to hold up good and holy and inspiring pictures of good men. Absolutely. That's absolutely worth affirming. But like I said, in our culture today, where it's gotten so confusing to understand what masculinity is all about, we can't get the cart before the horse. And so that's where these relational aspects, I think, are especially important, because here's the thing about these marks of manhood. They don't tell you what it means to be a good man. They just tell you what it means to be a man. So take honor, for example. Honor is really about doing right by your peers. Honor just means, kind of in the very old sense of the word, like how to really develop esteem with a group of men around you. Now, what's important there is that honor by itself is kind of morally neutral. Right. So if you pick a gang of bad guys to hang out with, you might have honor with that group of guys, but it could be
Right.
for doing really wrong things. It could be
Right.
for
Right.
doing
Yeah.
all the bad kinds of things, but it's just that that's what's respected and held in high regard among that group of men. So you might be high on honor, but low on goodness, and that's not okay. Like, that's not what we ultimately want as men, and especially as men who are trying to follow Jesus. But that's where I think it is really important for our sons to help them to understand, being a man isn't necessarily a morally good thing. You've got to learn what it means to be a man, and then how to be a good man. And part of that is saying like, oh, I can develop honor a whole lot of different ways, but who I choose to have honor with is really going to shape a whole lot about my life. And the same can be said for allegiance. The leaders that I choose to follow, the God that I choose to serve, is going to have a whole lot to do with the way that my life gets shaped. And if I choose those things poorly, then the kind of man I will become isn't something that's necessarily going to be worth upholding. Like that, I would be able to kind of stand that on a pedestal and say, look at this, guys, and other people would be proud of it, or impressed by it. So that's why it's, I think, really important and kind of critical to talk about it with our sons and to help them understand, like, here's what it means to be a man. Here's how you take that and turn it into being a good man.
Yeah, that allegiance. I don't know why, but lately World War II type stuff has been floating around in my sphere,
Yeah.
and they've been talking about men and Hitler, and you do
Yep.
things maybe because Israel's breaking loose and everything, but like as a man, things are happening around you, and a lot of guys are, hey, why did you just go with that? Why
Yeah.
didn't you put your foot down?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who was there?
Yeah.
And opposition force was there, but the people that were in Germany didn't say, yeah, this ain't right.
Yeah, yeah. A handful tried to do that, and they got killed for doing it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
allegiance is hard, right? I mean, it's hard sometimes to stand up for the allegiance that you need to have when it's going to put you in opposition to the culture around you. But that comes back to the kind of the basics of strength and courage. Like it's going to take strength and courage to be able to maintain an allegiance to something that the culture is opposing. And so, again, that's why it's worth talking about all of those things with our son. So you got to give them a clear vision of what it means to be a man. And I think that's what those 5 marks of manhood are really for.
Yeah, I like that. When you were talking about strength, that one really struck a chord with me because it's not something that you get, man, woman. Like it's just fact. Like even
Yeah.
my wife, she's like, why are they letting men swim
Yeah.
in the women's races? Like,
Right.
I'm confused. Like
Yeah.
this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
And
it doesn't, and that's what's really challenging about our culture right now is that at a just common sense level, everybody can look at it and go, there's something not right about that. But it takes a very complicated and convoluted culture to twist common sense around and to say, but we're going to do it differently anyway. And that's kind of where our culture is right now, is that we've twisted common sense quite a bit to where we're calling things that don't make sense right and good. And sometimes our world needs turning upside down in some ways in order to figure out what is really good and what is really right. I think probably your example of the Nazis in Germany needed their world turned upside down to be able to refigure out what was right and good, because they'd fallen into some traps there. But I think we're in kind of a place where we're on the opposite side of that coin. Where we're calling some things right and good that don't make a lot of sense, and we need to get back to some fundamentals to help us be able to find the way through.
with strength, what I also thought about, some of my college roommates were like those ultra athletes, super strong,
Mm-hmm,
lift
mm-hmm.
the world with one finger type
Right.
guys. And that wasn't me.
Yeah.
Might surprise you, but that wasn't me. And I see what those guys were doing. I'm like, man, I don't want to hit the gym 2 hours a day,
Yeah.
7 days a week. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And to some degree, like I was also in the army at that time, so there was some level of staying in shape because you were going to have
Sure.
a physical
Yeah.
test and you're going to
Right.
be around your peers and you didn't want to be less than.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
um, but when you're like strength isn't your strong suit, like
Yeah.
maybe
Mm-hmm.
your mental side's better or spiritual side's better or whatever it is, like man, maybe I can just like not really pay attention to that because um, what's it going to really get me? Like I'm
Yeah.
already in the lower side of things anyway. And if I get better, like I'll be average.
Yeah.
And I think that's a I think that's a limiting factor for guys who like I'm not good at it.
Right.
So why would I try?
Yeah. No,
Does that
I think that's a fantastic question, and I think it's especially true in our culture because again because of caricatures, we have these such extremes of what strength is supposed to look like for a man. Is it about being a fitness model? That you can see all of their muscles, but then the muscles are mostly for show more than they are for strength. Um, or is it about being this massive kind of like strongman type who can lift a car, but can't really sit in a chair. So
yeah.
there's all these just kind of like just blown over the top caricatures, and then at the same time we live in a culture that the average man is getting heavier and heavier. As a
Yes,
culture we're becoming
yes.
more and more obese and out of shape. So I think figuring the way through is really difficult. I try to talk about it in terms of just a couple things. As a man, here's usually kind of what my like go-to test is. Do you have the strength to meet your physical demands on a day-to-day basis without getting winded? Okay, so can you do the things that your day typically requires of you without getting winded? Which might be, simple things like walking up the stairs and carrying groceries in, or, playing with your kids, things like that. Can you do those basic things without getting winded? And second, do you have the strength to be able to show up and meet the needs in an emergency? Okay, so your kid gets, trapped under a piece of playground equipment that falls over, or like somebody gets a leg trapped under a lawnmower, or I'm kind of
Yeah,
using
yeah,
the same
yeah.
example, but like in an emergency situation, you need to jump a fence, you need to, whatever. Like, do you have the strength to be able to do something if someone's health or life is dependent on you being able to come through for them? Can you do it? And I think if we can answer yes to both of those questions, then we're probably pretty good. Like as men, we probably have the strength that is or ever could be needed from us. And that's really the point. Our bodies are meant to be offered for help for others. We need to use our strength to be able to help others. And maybe that means, carting your kids around on your back. Maybe it means, lugging a sofa up a flight of stairs with your buddy as he moves into a new apartment, whatever. Like, we need to be able to offer that, and to be able to do it without having to, hey, say, I need to stop and take a break. And I think if most men can answer yes to those questions, then they're probably in pretty good shape as it relates to, where we need strength in our modern age.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, yes, I like those couple of questions. So, guys, if you aren't in the greatest shape and you're like, why would I even try? Like, there's just some simple practical things like
Yeah,
be healthy. If you're in a little bit better shape, you'll be able to get down and, play with your kids on the ground. You'll
that's
be
right.
able to be on the playground with them, all kinds of practical things. Secondly, it's healthy.
Yeah,
Like 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, like you'll be able to live longer and have a more vibrant life. The emergency thing makes me think of the founder of F3. He came up with a little thing. It's a little different, but similar. He says, fatigue makes cowards of all men.
sure. Yeah,
So when you get tired, you're pushing your limits, you're winded. Like, I'm not going to do that next thing.
yeah, yeah,
Or weakness, if you don't know what you're made of, if you don't know what your strength is, you don't know. And something comes up and you're like, just going to let that bad thing happen because,
yeah,
what am I going to do?
yeah. How can I help? Yeah,
How can I
exactly.
help? Like, I'm weak. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, I might hurt myself. Like, forget that.
yeah,
But, and you don't have to be like an endurance athlete or any of that type thing, but like,
right.
do something.
Yeah,
And with that, you may have been going that direction with it too. But I think when you're doing physical activity, it lends to the mental strength as well,
yeah,
which then can also lead to spiritual strength as well.
yeah. Again, like I said, I really do think strength is the foundational attribute of what it means to be a man. It's not the only one, and it doesn't mean that women can't be strong, but it really is the foundational thing for men, out of which all of the other things flow. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah. I'm like, I almost stopped you right there when you were going through it. I was like, no, you're on a roll. I'm gonna let you keep going. But I totally believe that. Like in my life, when the fitness thing is going good, I'll eat better.
Uh
I'll
huh.
be a better person to people around me. I'll make
Yeah.
better decisions. Like
Your mind is more clear. Your focus
mine's
is
more
better.
clear.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All of the above.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So yeah, I love that. That a lot flows from that strength part. Courage. I have more courage when I'm in better shape.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
all the rest of them down the
I feel
list, like
confident in what my body can do, and so I don't mind tackling some challenges because I have some confidence that I could actually meet that. That's where courage comes from. So yeah, I agree.
we did a trunk or treat the other day, and a lady, one of our friends, she unexpectedly spins towards me and hands me a bag of M&Ms or something. I'm like, she goes, I can't open it. And I'm like, I'm a man. Let me just knock this out real easy for you. And
Yeah.
it was hard. And I thought, oh my gosh, maybe I'll just, go get some scissors or something. And I thought,
Yeah.
man, I'm a man. I got to knock this out.
Figure this one out. Yeah. That's right. That's right.
I did it though. I did
That's good. That's good.
it. Oh man. And then courage. We can build that on our own.
Hmm.
What are some tips you got there? Maybe something as you're doing the rites of passage thing. Have you got something in there for the boys?
Oh, I do actually. Yes, in the rite of passage, it's actually one of my favorite steps in the rite of passage that we do. Um, for them, so I'm skipping ahead a couple steps, so we'll have to kind of retrack and talk about some things. But
Yeah.
for the sons in the rite of passage, one of the challenges that they have that is meant for helping them develop courage is they have to have a face-to-face conversation with a girl.
Go on.
Yeah, so in this day and age, most conversations happen over text message, at best, especially with this generation of younger sons. And so this is a way to kind of push them into waters that they're already nervous and unfamiliar, with, about what do I say and how do I talk to a girl, and what do we even talk about. So it just kind of forces them to do it. And I think in a lot of ways that really is the essence of building courage. Sometimes, when I talked about an emergency, sometimes courage is needed. Like, we've got to summon it from a place to be able to meet a demand that's right in front of us that we didn't expect, and that does
Hmm.
take courage. But more often than not, courage is just saying, this thing in my life that makes me uncomfortable, I'm actually going to face it, and I'm going to do something about it. And that could just be like, there's this like thing in my garage that I know needs fixing, and I have just been putting it off. Like this is a broken thing on my car or something broken from my house. Like, I don't know what to do with it exactly, so I just haven't done anything. Well, like, in some ways that's a skill test, but it's also a courage test. Like, am I willing to face my own insecurity over the fact that I don't know what to do here, and to actually kind of figure out, something, whether that's talking to a friend or even just watching a YouTube video to help me figure out,
Hmm.
how do I tackle this problem. That's courage. And I think by kind of some of those like smaller examples, that's how we develop courage, so that when we get into some of those bigger examples where we're caught off guard by something that we didn't expect and might really be afraid of and have absolutely no idea how to handle, we at least have the fortitude to say, I can step into this as a man and offer something. It might not be enough. It might not be exactly what's needed, but I can try. I at least have the courage to try. And that's better than I'm not going to try at all. That's really what failure looks like. And that's where a total lack of courage comes into play. So, it's better that we develop enough courage as men to be able to face our fears and attempt to overcome them. And you do that by just like looking at your life and saying, what are the things that I'm avoiding? Where are the places that I don't want to show up? And make a list of 5 of them, and just, like, one at a time, knock them out. Just figure out something to do about each of those things. Even if you don't get it right, just make an attempt. That's how you develop your courage muscle.
Where does confidence fit into all this?
I think confidence comes on the back end of trying and succeeding. So trying something you don't know how to do, and
Hmm.
then figuring out that you can do something about it. Again, it may not have been the perfect solution. You may not get it exactly right on the first attempt,
Hmm.
but confidence comes through making an attempt and seeing that you can get some results. Like, I'm capable of doing something here. I have something to offer. And confidence comes out of that place over just repeated
Yeah.
efforts,
Yeah.
where you see that you can actually contribute and produce some results. And then you're not as afraid to try to step in and do something the next time.
I've been working with some people recently and showing them examples in the past where they stepped into something uncomfortable and accomplished it,
Yeah.
or even did something that was routine for them, but not routine for somebody else. And,
Yeah.
just showing them, hey, you had some success,
Yeah. That's right.
and helping
That's right.
them look back and recognize there's a book out there, The Gap and the Gain.
Mm-hmm.
And in that book, it talks about, what have you done? What have you accomplished? Recognizing the little wins throughout the day or the big wins, and using that to gain confidence, to gain, happiness, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's right. So yeah, so this is a really good point. This is actually kind of what I would say is sort of, I said there's 3 things that your son needs to know in order to become a man. This is what I would say is the second one, is that he needs opportunities to practice being a man. right? So if the
Yes,
first one is,
yes.
he needs a clear vision of what it means to be a man. That's the first one. The second one is that he needs opportunities to practice being a man. And so, I think the way we do this in the rite of passage, the way that I've done this with my own sons, is we create things that we call manhood challenges, and they're really just kind of like simple things built around those 5 marks of manhood. So what I just mentioned to you about the courage challenge of having a face-to-face real conversation with a girl, like that's a manhood challenge. That's a way to try to get better in one of those 5 marks of manhood. And I think especially at this kind of like middle school age for sons, where they're in the range of about 11 to 15, kind of that dynamic. This phase of practicing being a man is so crucial to them for exactly what you're talking about. They need to develop that confidence, sort of that like settled inner sense that they are men. And by that, they know that in the sense that, I think it's John Eldredge who maybe first talked about it, but every other men's writer since has talked about the idea of that you have what it takes,
Do I have
that
what it
you
takes? Yeah.
understand. Yeah, you believe kind of on the inside that, hey, I can show up and offer something in the face of this challenge. I have what it takes to be able to enter in this and into this and to attempt to overcome it. Again, we're not going to get it perfectly right every time, but that isn't the point. The point is, do I have that settled confidence, that belief in myself that I can offer something here? Whatever something looks like, I can offer something. And boys and young men really develop that during this age and stage of life, where they are going through a lot of these different challenges, facing all kinds of new and different things as they both go through puberty and start to begin to enter into adult life. There's all kinds of things for them to meet, and they need to face those things. I think that the difficulty in our culture at the moment is that we have, in a lot of ways, as a society, really robbed our young men of the opportunities to be challenged in some of those areas. So, you look at guys today that are in their adolescence. A lot of their days are filled with video games and
Mm-hmm.
social media and texting and maybe some sports, but for the most part, it's just those things. It's largely a digital world. It's largely contained in this sort of sterile bubble of their phone or their PlayStation or whatever. And it really robs them of the challenges of real life. Like leveling up on the latest Xbox adventure is not the same thing as having to figure out how to change a flat tire on your car. Like they
Yeah,
are not the
artificial.
same.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're
artificial.
artificial. You're right. And so, I think as dads in particular, part of what we have to own is to recognize that our sons need challenging. They need to be challenged and tested in this stage of life to help them become men, so that as they enter into adulthood, they have developed that kind of confidence that says, I can face down these challenges. As a teenager, it might be small things like, learning to change a tire, which that's maybe even a bigger example than is necessary. But just, a simple thing like learning to have a conversation with a girl is important, because later on in life, that translates into how to navigate a really difficult conflict with my wife. Like that's real life. That's the real world. And if you don't learn how to be able to do some of that in adolescence, or at least learn the confidence that says, I can enter into this and offer something, then in adulthood, you get to that place and you just fall apart. There's an absence of manhood there, and it leads to failures in relationship. It leads to failures in family. It leads to, increasing conflict and stress and anxiety and all kinds of other bad things, because you didn't get challenged, uh, you know, to the extent that you really needed to in those adolescent years to help you develop that settled confidence moving into your adult years. So,
So what
uh,
I'm
yeah,
yeah,
as
what
dads,
I'm
we got
hearing,
to enter
yeah.
in there.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is as dads and moms, I know moms aren't really listening, but FYI,
Yeah,
as you're talking about these things, Don, guys are probably thinking, huh, I could use a little help there.
yeah,
I'm deficient there.
yeah.
I know we are talking about the strength and all that, but it's mental strength, it's spiritual strength, the relationship with Christ and everything. So if you're deficient in one of those strengths, you've got to work to build yourself up, because your kids are looking to you as the example.
That's right.
And your kids go, well, he doesn't do it.
Yeah,
He doesn't do it. He tells me to do it, but he doesn't do it.
Right. That's right.
You know, you were talking about going to church. I'm a churchgoer as well. Some of the audience are not churchgoers, so maybe we get
Okay.
into that a little bit. But
Okay. Yep.
you know, um, Dad doesn't go to church, but he sure opens the door and gets us out so he can watch
Yeah.
football
Right.
or
Yeah.
whatever. So,
Yeah.
guys, I'm not picking on you on that one, but at the same time, it's that time of year where football's on.
I love some football too, but yeah, I mean, there's questions of allegiance there. Like what does
Yeah.
allegiance really look like? Who are you allegiant to? You might say that God is your ultimate allegiance, but show me the evidence in your life that says, what my life is really ordered around is my God, is my faith. Like, show the evidence of that, and that will prove what your allegiance is all about. Your kids won't have a hard time figuring that out. They won't have a hard time being able to look at your life as a dad and know, do his words match his life? If he says that his ultimate allegiance is to God, but his life looks like this over here, is his ultimate allegiance really to football, which that's maybe extreme, but to his own pleasure and relaxation, like that becomes the priority over everything? Is it to his work? Is it to money? Is it to, whatever? Like it could be a whole bunch of different things. Your kids won't have a hard time seeing that in your life. So you've got to match it up with what you're saying. But I think another big one there for dads is the whole idea of honor, right? So when we talk about honor, we're talking about doing right by our peers. And I think a lot of dads would want to be able to tell their sons, hey, who you choose to be friends with really matters because it's going to shape a lot of who you are. But then as grown men, we really struggle with actually having other men in our lives, like of having anyone around us that we actually are worthy of that man's honor, that we've done anything to develop relationships with other guys where there is such a thing as honor in my life. Most American men, Christian or not, are living very isolated, independent lives right now. And, that's reflected in the loneliness epidemic that is only increasing in our culture. And so, we're kind of living without this virtue of honor at the moment because we're living so isolated from one another. So, same thing, dads, like, it's one thing to tell your son that he needs to pick his friends well. It's another thing for you to say to yourself, I need some friends. I've got to have some men around me who know me and who are helping to shape me into being the man that I know that I want to be and who God has made me to be. So honor's got to be just as important to you as you want it to be for your son.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think that honor category too, if you're not doing what you'd like your kids to see,
Yep.
I think that's an honor thing. I think,
Yep.
you lose some points on the scorecard there,
Yeah.
or, all that. Your family cred goes down there.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So you talked about guys lonely and all that type thing. So we'll sidetrack the rites of passage thing, guys. We'll get back to it, I promise. Um, Talk about that. Like, let me put you on the spot. We didn't talk
Okay.
about this before,
That's great.
but um, what do you do in your own life to develop male friendships?
Yeah.
And
So
you might be a little bit different. Maybe we should talk about Joe over in the corner with you being a church pastor,
fair. Yeah. I think that is fair. Um, yes, I would say,
or you being a church pastor. Maybe you isolate yourself from whatever, but like
yeah.
frame it up. Go.
Yeah, I would say I'm probably different than what I know of as most pastors. So I'll put myself in kind of a separate category. Although I do think, from what I see and from what research has shown, pastors tend to be some of the loneliest men that we know.
Yes,
They are
100%.
surrounded by people, often surrounded by men, but rarely connect well with any of them because they're having to relate to most of the men around them at some sort of a business like level. When you're the pastor, people come to you looking for answers, and that becomes almost like a contractual relationship instead of a true relationship. So a little side tangent there, but yes, most pastors are just as, if not more, lonely than other men.
So guys, go talk to your pastor and be in a
Yeah,
group with them.
absolutely. Yeah. And give him
Drop
the
your
freedom to
guard.
talk to
Yeah.
you without consequence. Let him just say what's going on in his world and don't judge him for it. His life is just as hard and maybe harder than yours. So give him some space to be honest about that. And
Once upon
anyway,
a time in my life, I met a guy after a big thing that he did, big speech and all that, and on the stage, and I added my courage because I was like, oh gosh, I'm not worthy to talk to this guy and all that. And this is years ago, but I said, hey man, you did a fantastic thing for all the people in the audience. Like people were moved, good things are going to happen from this. And I just want to let you know you did a good thing, and I really appreciate you taking your time out of your day to do this big thing. And he's like, "Who are you?" Told him, and he goes, "My version is, well, what do you want? What do you need? Like, why did you wait in this line?" I was like,
Yeah.
that was the only reason, was just to encourage you to keep doing good things for people.
Yeah.
He's like, that's it? You don't want anything?
Mm,
So
yeah.
go to your church pastor, not wanting anything other than to let him know something that he did well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because as men, when we encourage other men, he'll be more bold. He'll be talking to the men more. He'll be encouraged, So I think that's a really, really important thing that gets overlooked. I think our pastors get overlooked by men because they're just doing their job. Like,
Right.
what
That's
do they
right.
need us for? They've got plenty of other people, fanning the flames and, giving them
Yeah.
affirmations and whatever. So they don't need this
Which,
stuff.
yeah, which is a myth. It's really not true. It's an easy assumption, but it's just not true.
Right, right, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah. So I would say to any guy, you're going to have to take some initiative to build some friends around you, right? It's going to take some effort. Our culture doesn't promote male friendship in any way naturally anymore. So, other than like you might find some work colleagues to talk about, work related things with. You might find some drinking buddies to watch a football game with. Those are about the extent of what male friendship tends to look like for most guys. But finding men in your life who can know and understand your story, what has shaped you into the man that you have become, the challenges that you are facing today, what you need in order to be able to overcome them, and that you are learning all those things about them as well. And that together you guys are helping each other to be able to face all of that. Like that's the kind of friendship that you need. And those don't come easy. They don't just happen for most men. You're going to have to figure out ways to be able to make them happen for you. So I've actually started the organization that I have started is called Manhood Tribes. So this rite of passage that I'm doing is really part of that. But Manhood Tribes is really all about creating groups of manly men who follow Jesus at every stage of life. And the idea there is that as men, we are meant to, part of being a man is that you are meant to do it in the context of other men. That's really what honor is all about. To be the man that you are supposed to be, you need other men around you. It's a necessity. It's not optional. It's not a nice to have. It is part of the way that you are designed. And so, I would challenge any guy who doesn't have that to figure out a way to do it in your life. And that might be, it's going to look different for every guy. It might be if you're involved in a church that it's really as simple as you need to find, 3 or 4 other guys at your church that you can begin to start having some of those conversations with. Not every guy that's going to be easy to do, whether you're in a church or not. If you're not, you need to find them through whatever context you have in your life. And now this is where it gets tricky because for a lot of guys, there aren't any contexts in their life apart from work and family, right? I go to my job, I come home to my family, and that's all there is to me. I don't have hobbies. I don't have interests. I don't have, things that I do outside of those hours. And that becomes a real problem. So if that's you, like that's where you got to start. You need a life, frankly. You need more to your life than just work and family. None of us are meant to survive on just that alone. And so you've got to be able to start developing something, whether that's you join a gym to help improve your strength and fitness, and you look for a gym that's going to promote community and interaction more than it's going to promote like you just coming and putting in your headphones and doing your own workout and everybody's doing the exact same thing. So look for places where you're going to be able to interact. If the fitness
That's where I
world
see
is,
the CrossFit thing going crazy, because
yeah,
it's
that's
it's
why
all about
CrossFit has
community.
been so successful, is because of that community aspect. But it doesn't have to be in the fitness world that you find that. You can do it with anything. I've got a really close friend who does it through board games. Like he loves board games and has found a community of other board gamers, in the area, and they get together. They have different tournaments and whatnot that go on, throughout the month. And so he finds ways of being able to connect with that group of people that way. It can be any interest or hobby that you have. For a lot of guys, things like woodworking or any kind of craftsmanship sort of idea is an easy way to get started. Cars, motorcycles, food, barbecue, like you name it. Like figure out what your interest is, and I guarantee you there's probably some kind of community in your area of other men who are pursuing that same interest, and you've just got to get connected with them. Just start there. And your conversations may only ever initially be about that thing that you're mutually interested in, right? But there's only so much that you can talk about barbecue, so eventually that's where you have to take the initiative to say, hey Brad, or whoever is in the group with you, like, hey, can we go grab lunch together, and I just would love to get to know you a little bit more outside of just talking about barbecue. And that's step one, and then that's where you begin to kind of have some of those more fruitful and soul nourishing conversations about, hey, help me understand who you are and how you've become the man that you've become, and I want to do the same.
So keep going. What else? We got
Yeah.
initiative. We got developing
Yeah.
ourselves, finding some interesting things to do that we enjoy. That's something that we can tend to do. It's low priority. We got to protect. We got to uh, you know feed our family. We got to take care of business. We got to get our accolades at work.
Yeah. So, I think once you begin to find three, four, five guys that you can start having some of those kinds of conversations with, where you've initiated, a little more actual relationship with them. I think that's when you need to start trying to pull them together as a group. So instead of just like, I've had these kind of one-on-one conversations with a few different guys and those are going well and I'm enjoying those friendships. Now it's time to start trying to pull that group of guys together as an actual group and to begin having those conversations kind of together as a group. And if you are a follower of Christ, like, that's especially where in that group context, you begin to help kind of challenge each other and hold each other accountable to, how am I living my life in a way that shows my allegiance to Jesus? That shows
Mm-hmm.
my honor to the way that Jesus would live. How are we holding each other to those standards? And there's a number of different ways that you can do that. That could be through prayer time. It could be through you're reading a book together on, manhood and faith, or you're just doing something that's kind of challenging everybody together and talking through, like, how do we uphold those things as a group. So I don't want to get overly prescriptive there, but I think there's a little, there's kind of a
Yeah.
simple roadmap that I think any guy can follow, and it's going to look a little different for every guy. But I think going from, I need to find an interest, I need to get to know some people who share my interests, I need to take some initiative with a few guys from that, interest level to develop it into something more specific and more intentional. I need to pull that, those individuals together into a group. And then as a group, we need to start talking about the things that really matter, that are really going to help challenge us to be the men that we want to be.
That's great. I think that was super, super helpful for guys. And you can, do something silly. Like I was thinking, I was helping my wife with something. She wanted to ride a Peloton. And what women love to do is they love to be social.
Yeah, that's right.
And what I like to do is be fiscally responsible. So I found the alternative $600 echelon or whatever it was. And
Sure.
in doing my research, I was like, holy cow, these other alternatives don't have that connected platform where your people jump on and you're chatting as you're
Right.
riding and,
Right.
that community aspect. And I'm like, wow, that's overwhelmingly different than the other options. And women are social. They want to. And so, hey, who's on the Peloton? And all the neighborhood women are like, oh, I got one. I got one. I ride at 10. I ride at 2. And I'm like, hey, honey, here's, all these different women. If you want to connect with, you can ride at 10 and she'll be
Yeah.
on. And,
Yeah.
she's like, what? I'm like, yeah, we're getting you a Peloton and here's all the stuff. And she's like, why are we getting a Peloton? Like, that one doesn't make financial sense. I'm like,
Yeah.
but it makes community sense.
Right. A, I love you for that answer, but B, I know this is going to be great for you. So let's do it.
Yeah, she was the one who came up there. Like, I'm
Yeah.
all for it. How,
Yeah.
and I had to justify the extra $1,000. I was trying not to justify the extra $1,000
Right.
is what I was trying.
Right.
And then I discovered that and I'm like,
Worth it.
community, man. It's
Yeah.
it's community and relationship. And when you can find a avenue to enhance that,
Yeah.
I want to do fitness anyway. And like you said, find a gym that encourages community, togetherness,
Yeah. That's right.
interaction,
That's
you
right.
know,
Yeah.
uh, pickle, pickleball, pickle.
Pickleball. Yeah. It's all the rage apparently. I haven't played myself, but I hear about it everywhere. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I did one the other day. I'm like, I can see anybody can play this.
Yeah, I think that's why it's gained in popularity. That's great.
It's way easier than playing tennis with your kids. Your
Yeah,
kids can
absolutely.
actually play pickleball, so and be a little bit more competitive against you than you would think. So,
That's fun. That's fun.
and you mentioned clear vision, opportunities to practice.
Yep.
What's the third thing?
Yeah. So the third thing that you need to help your son become a man is that or he needs, a dedicated season to advance from boyhood to manhood. So now we're kind of finally to it, of the idea of what a rite of passage is all about and how to be able to do that well. He needs a dedicated season to advance from boyhood to manhood. And, I was particular there to say that he needs a season because I think that while this idea of a rite of passage, some kind of like an event or program that kind of formalizes the idea of my son has moved from being a boy to being a man. I think that's gained a lot of popularity in the past, decade or so, especially among faith circles. But in a lot of ways, it has kind of been reduced to just some sort of like a one-off ceremony, like whether that's
Mm-hmm.
over the course of a weekend or a special night, or something like that. It's kind of a
Yeah,
ceremony
yeah,
where you gather people together, you say a bunch of really cool things, you tap your son on the shoulder with a sword, and look, I got it in the background here. I'm all for
yeah.
swords, but
Guys that are
like
listening, yeah, there's swords in the background.
yeah, yeah. But like in and of itself, that ceremony isn't going to be enough to actually advance your son from boyhood to manhood. So a rite of passage really does have to be a process of some kind where he goes through some steps that allow him to believe about himself, that he has if not exactly earned manhood, he has stepped into a setting where other men recognize him as a man. And that's really what's especially important about it, is that
Yes.
he understands not just that they've said that I'm a man, but he has demonstrated to them and they recognize that he is a man. And that takes a process, that takes time, that takes relational interaction, that takes community, like we talked about, that takes all of those things. So that's where I think a rite of passage ceremony is an okay thing to do, but I really think it needs to be accompanied by a process. So what I've designed actually is an experience that I call First Tribe. So it's really kind of about like creating your son's first tribe experience, a group of dads and sons that are really around each other and that are helping usher these young sons into manhood. So it's a 9-month experience where you just meet once a month. And the content is kind of built around big questions about what it means to be a man, what it means to follow God. Do I have what it takes? What am I meant to offer to the world as a man? Like all these things that we've kind of been talking about, all those themes come out in this rite of passage, meeting once a month. But then in between those meetings, you get to do a lot of things like manhood challenges. You find some things to do, dad and son together, that encourage your son to step up to the plate a little bit, to demonstrate that he does have what it takes, so that he goes through this process. And by the time he gets to that sort of final ceremony, he is already at the place of feeling like, yeah, I belong as a man. So when men are offering him the words of, we see and recognize you as a man, he sees and recognizes himself as a man, and that's what's just as important. So so I think that kind of whole process of a rite of passage is really necessary to advancing our sons from boyhood to manhood.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. And you added in the community aspect of it. So it's not just a dad telling his
That's right.
son, it's a community of dads.
Yeah. Yeah. Men come to understand that they are men because they get recognized as a man by other people that they know are men, right? So that was a little complicated the way I said that, but basically it's just like, hey, if I know that you're a man and you think I'm a man, then I probably am one. Like that's basically how we come to figure out and believe that we're men.
Right.
So the more that you can get your son around a community of men that you know and that he would admire, the better it's going to be for him in terms of kind of advancing into manhood.
Yeah, I love that. Um, Anything else that the listeners should know about?
Yeah, so I would say kind of just like we talked about for guys who are trying to develop a group of friends, as you're thinking about like, hey, maybe I've got maybe you've got a middle school age son, and you're kind of thinking like, this might be a thing I would really love to do for my son, but I wouldn't know who to ask to be a part of this group of dads and sons with us. And that's where I say, like, actually, you can lean on your boy a little bit for this one. So instead of as a dad having to kind of really develop a group of dads, where you might start is developing a group of sons and then including the dads of those sons into the group. So you might be the one with the strangers in the group, and your son really kind of knows a lot of he's inviting his friends into it, and you just have to kind of do the heavy lifting of getting to know the other dads. That's worth it for your son's sake, for you to do the heavy lifting there. But B, hey, maybe that's a great way for you to actually get to know some other guys that you could begin to have intentional conversations with, because you get started with, we all have a shared interest in developing our sons, and that's an easy place to get started. So I would say start there. Start by asking your son, hey, I've got this thing that I think would be really good for us to do together, but I want you to invite some of your friends to do it with you, who are, 4, 5, or 6 of your good friends, your peers, that would be fun for us to do this experience with. And, start there. Start by asking him.
We had a previous guest on, and he said he'd bring boys over to his house and teach them different things. And he goes, a lot of the stuff we did was more competition type stuff, but like crazy competitions.
Yeah,
Like
that's right. Yeah.
I was like, name one. He's like, well, like, see who can spit the highest on the window.
Yeah.
And then, we clean it later and blah, blah. And he's like, and then when I was stuck on things to do, I just pull a stopwatch out.
Yeah.
And you just tell them anything to do as long as
And
they're,
time it.
clocking it
Yeah.
with stopwatch, like
Yeah.
they're
Who can
into
do
it.
it the
They're gonna have
fastest?
fun.
Yeah. That's
so
exactly right.
so these gatherings don't have to be the most complicated things in the world. And
No,
then
not at all.
he'd bring an element like, skill or courage or something and explain a little bit about it and go back and forth with the boys. And then they'd have a competition, and it was all fun. Like,
Yeah, yeah. So in the first tribe rite of passage gatherings, usually the first thing that we do to get started with a meeting is some kind of a game, and I really love the minute to win it games.
yeah,
A, because they're easy to pull off the internet, and anybody kind of has access to them. B, because they're short and simple, and C, just because they don't necessarily. It's not about testing athletic ability as much as it is just about having fun and competing. So one that I've played that I think is hilarious is you tape a couple tea bags to the brim of a baseball cap, and you're just kind of like flinging them around to see who can like land the tea bags on the on the bill of the cap, and nobody can do it. It's nearly impossible, but it's fun to just watch each other like throw your head around and see what happens with these tea bags. So it's those kinds of things, especially with boys who are in this like middle school stage of life, that just makes getting together fun and enjoyable. As grown men, as adults, we don't often do those kinds of like silly things very much anymore, but they're still fun for us too. So so I think it's where it's really good to just kind of let the boy out a little bit, come and play with your son, do some fun things like that. It's a great way to connect, and to build community with other dads and sons too. So I wholeheartedly agree. There's got to be some fun involved, to make it worth it and to make it effective.
so guys, something you may consider, what Don just said is, he's like, you gotta keep the fun element. So you may consider, tracking every day for a week. Here I am throwing out a challenge. We'll get to another one, but you may consider throwing out every day for a week, just keeping track of how much fun you have.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
that was fun. That was fun. That was fun.
Yeah.
And by doing that, you'll be focusing on fun, and then that'll expand in your life, and you'll have more fun with people around you and your kids and everything else, even at work.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
If you
that's
get
great.
so
Yeah.
serious with stuff, you can overlook having fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, most guys, in addition to not having very many friends, most adult men don't have a lot of play time in their life,
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, so I think this is a great way to build in some play into your life as well.
I mentioned it before, but one of my buddies, he lives up in Canada. He dances 3 times a day.
Yeah. That's
It doesn't
fun,
have to be,
Yeah.
a 2 minute dance or nothing, but he just has to a couple times a day, and he tracks that.
Yeah. That's great.
Hey, I got too serious today. I didn't dance at all.
Yeah.
Oh darn. Like,
I need,
that's
need
his
more
measurement.
dancing. Need more dancing. That's great.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah, absolutely. So where can guys reach out to you? Where can they find you? How can they connect? How can they join the tribe?
Yeah. So the best way, if you're a dad with a middle school son, the easiest way to go check out some of this stuff would be to go to myfirsttribe.com. So you can check out the First Tribe rite of passage there and see if that's something that you might be interested in. If that's not you, if you're not a dad with a middle school age son, you can still go to myfirsttribe.com, and there's a pop-up window there where you can sign up for one of our email trainings, and that'll get you, kind of exposed to the message that we talk about, but also get you connected to all the other things that we do as well. So myfirsttribe.com.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. So something that I have every guest do, I threw out a challenge already, but
Okay.
I have every guest throw out a challenge, something guys can do week to week. Could be fun, could be tough, could be whatever, but something that'll help them develop, some get better in some way, shape or form. Maybe as a leader of their family, maybe as a leader at work, maybe uh could be, one of the five characteristics,
Mm-hmm,
but
mm-hmm.
wherever you want to take that, but something that guys can do week to week where they're like with a pen and paper right now, ready to
Yeah.
write it down and get on it this week.
No, that's great. I love that. I would say, and especially since we talked so much about strength, and just how kind of foundational that is, I would say one challenge that I think is really good that you can do for yourself, but it's really fun to involve your family members in it as well. Your wife, your kids, whoever. You can do it together. Test yourself now by seeing how many push-ups you can do in 60 seconds. So just kind of a basic strength challenge. How many push-ups can you do in 60 seconds? And you might be able to do 60, or you might be able to do none, and that's okay. Like you're testing kind of where you're at the moment. Maybe you need to do some push-ups on your knees because you can't do a single plank push-up. That's okay. Just figure out where your base level is at the moment, and then over the course of the next 30 days, just try to 2 to 3 times a week work on doing some push-ups, and then at the end of a month, retest yourself and see how much better you've been able to get. Again, do it with your family as well. If you've got some buddies that you can challenge each other, hey, let's see what we can do this month. It's just a great way to develop a little bit of strength, to push yourself a little bit, in terms of a challenge. And I think just to kind of remind ourselves that, hey, our bodies are built for strength, and they do get better. They get stronger if we test them and challenge them. So, pretty simple and straightforward strength challenge, but I think a really good one.
That's cool. That's cool. So guys, here's one way where you might be able to implement with your family. I was talking with some guys and they're all going to do this push-up challenge.
Yeah.
What? What's that like, Dad? And then tell them whatever you want to design the challenge as.
Yeah.
And I've done this one before, and what you'll find is that you'll have a baseline that you start with, and your improvement over 30 days is radical.
Yeah. Yeah.
Radical. I was in the military years ago, and when I was in, I think the minimum was maybe 13 push-ups in order to be able to actually go to basic training.
Right.
If you couldn't do 13, they'd hold you back. And in order to graduate basic training, I think he had to do 32 as a younger guy. I think that was the minimum standard.
Sure.
And the max was, I don't know, 84 or something like
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
I was always hacked off because I like got close. I get 80 or whatever the number
Yeah.
was. I was so close. And finally I got it. Finally I started being able to hit it 100% of the time on every
Yeah.
PT test that we took. But wherever you are, so if you get six, hey, you got six.
Yeah.
I'd encourage you to, like you say, go to your knees and do that type of push up to finish out the minute.
Yep.
And that, record it, write it down. That's your baseline. Go 30 days, do some push ups every day, and then look back at what your first score was and what your finishing score was over 30 days of focusing on push ups. And if you don't do 30 or 40 push ups, if you started at six at the beginning, I'd be shocked.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not about the gap between where you are and where you'd like to be. It's about just measuring every day and seeing your progress,
That's
or
right.
measuring once a week and seeing your progress, and like, hey, I did something. You
Yeah.
talked about learning. I learned something. I got
That's right.
better at something. I focused
Yeah.
on something. And
Yeah.
uh, that's an easy way to connect with other guys. Hey, dude, man, I'm doing this stupid thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my
Pretty
kids and the
simple.
stuff. And hey, we could do that stupid thing. No
That's
kidding.
right. Yeah. Guys love a
You know,
challenge. So yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it's funny you bring that one up. That one's so simple, but a bunch of guys I know have done that one, and that's a fun play to run.
Yeah.
And your kids will jump in if you invite them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's great. And then I love the value of that, of, shifting physical training over to our kids. So I like to think that my kids hang on to that. So as they get older and older and older, they continue to do active stuff and
Yeah.
stay in shape and not become obese America. Like, you know, when I look around the world, that's what I see. As you get
Yeah.
older, you just gain weight and get out of shape.
Yeah. It
And there's nothing
happens.
you can do about it because that's what I see everybody else doing. So, anyway, yeah, strength and physical shape. I'm not Ironman endurance guy or any of that, but I definitely enjoy competing with other guys, and it's about getting better yourself.
Yeah.
Not
Absolutely.
not necessarily about Don beating me or me beating Don, although that's fun. It's about you advancing yourself and paying attention to that aspect of life as well.
That's right.
Cool. Well, that's an awesome challenge. As you can tell, I totally dig it. And guys, check out the rites of passage and the tribes that Don's got going on. He's got some cool material over there.
Yeah.
And then we'll put all your links and everything in the show notes, of course, Don.
Okay. Fantastic. Dan, this has been a real pleasure. Thanks, man. Thanks for letting me come on the show.
Absolutely, man. Thrilled to have you on. Look forward to catching up again soon.
All right.
All right. Thanks so much. Bye bye.